just in case you need to drive up to San Jose one day. Can't come to class. All right. So we're talking.
Well, Jim, it's 10 o'clock here in Maryland, so
Okay.
Oh.
I might do the rest of them, the video. We'll see.
You do it that way, however you can. Becky and Ed, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Oh,
Good. I'm glad you're here. Good to have everybody here. We are talking about joy. How many have loved those moments when you could say, that was joy? That was joyful. That was a moment of joy, right? Those are good moments, aren't they? And we have moments like that on a regular basis, but one of the distinctions that I think is really important is what they're trying to say right at the beginning of the book. So let me show you my introduction here. This quote right here is one of my favorite quotes in the whole book. Joy is much big. Oh, I'm not sharing it with you, am I? I'm just talking about it. Let me share it with you. Joy is much bigger than happiness. While happiness is often seen as being dependent on external circumstances, joy is not. We're most of us pretty good at figuring out how to do happiness, aren't we? We figured out some of the things that if I do this, I'm happy. If someone does this for me, I'm happy. Whatever it happens to be like that. Joy, though, is the same type of thing, but it's a longer lasting and a deeper feeling. And so it's a bit more challenging for us. How do we get to that space? The good news is as they started out, the two spiritual giants said this in their very first page. No dark fate determines the future. We do. This is the power we have. We have the power in every single moment to decide if this will be a moment of joy or of something else. Now, we can't decide anything. Everything. If your car gets hit, it's going to be a moment of pain.
Yeah.
Right? But is that all it is? That's where you get to decide. How is it that you're going to react to whatever it is that you can't control? I was telling that to Jan earlier that my granddaddy has a saying that is about letting go of that which you can't control and not worrying about that which you can't control. And making the choice of how to deal with the other differently. So I want you to introduce yourself to each other and tell each other one moment of joy from your life. Someplace where you just had that sense of this is what joy means. So I'll just call on you one by one, starting on the bottom row. Jenny.
I'm not on the bottom row here.
No, you're not, but you are on mine.
Okay, I'm on the top row here. Okay. Actually, well, it was when we had the asylum seekers.
Uh-huh.
And I was walking up from the office up back towards where the kids were. And it was when we were still letting the kids ride bicycles. And there were about 3 or 4 of them that were coming down the driveway, hell bent for leather. And I waved at them and they all waved at me. They got big grins on their faces. And I felt from watching them, I learned what joy was. And that I found that it was contagious.
Yeah. And I think that looking at kids often helps us to try to figure out where joy is, where joy resides. Because they have a better way of not limiting themselves by some of the circumstances. Thank you. Judy, you're next.
Me?
Judy West.
Oh, okay. There's usually more than one Judy, so I'm never sure. My biggest joy is my grandchildren, but the one I want to talk about right now is I have these hummingbird feeders that I get visited with hummingbirds constantly. And today a Gila woodpecker came and landed on it and was feeding my hummingbird feeder
Yeah.
and chasing off the hummingbirds.
Mm,
And I just sat there, just thrilled, watching this in my patio.
yeah, marvelous.
Very basic, but the nature generally, we also have a nesting pair of great horned owls on the property.
Nice.
And I see them every day also.
Good. Thank you
That
very
brings
much.
me
So we're going to go to the one who that just a few minutes ago was a very pretty Becky Wilson, and now has seemed to have aged
Growing
in.
a beard.
So Ed, tell us who you are in a moment of joy.
Well, this is the old traditional one. My marriage to Becky was probably the most joyful single moment of my life. I don't know, or that or receiving our 6 weeks old adopted child back years ago. And I was thinking of a more recent one, but it happened yesterday morning. And I don't know if I can convey that one very well.
Yeah.
The turning point in my life.
Okay.
A whole new realization.
Good.
It is opening up a whole new future for me.
Wonderful. Jamie, good to have you with us. I know that your family is going through joyful times because her son Ian graduated. And so that's
Oh.
exciting. So tell us other places that have been places of joy. Another moment.
Well, I'm sorry I'm late.
No problem. You're right on time.
You'll have to come back to me. I was a little scattered getting connected.
All right. We'll come back. Melanie,
Well,
tell us about, oh, go ahead.
We did get Ian's report card today,
Straight A's.
except for the A pluses.
Oh, separate.
Oh, wow.
You tell him congratulations from all of us. Melanie, tell us about you. What's a moment of joy in your life?
Well, as a nurse, I did work in labor and delivery and at births and saw the joy in the parents. But when I had my son, 2:19 in the morning, and of course hadn't gotten any sleep, but it was natural childbirth, so I wasn't under the influence of any medication. And it was just a joy that lasted for hours and hours. I just wasn't sleepy. I wasn't tired. I don't think I slept until the next night. It was just so amazing. So that was 40 years ago, but I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to talk about more recent joys, but that one popped into my head.
But those type of joys and they talk about this later on in the book, are such deep moments of joy that they really change our perspective from that moment on in many different ways, don't they?
I mean, it was a real honor to be present at the births of our patients' babies. And of course, all of us in the room participated. But then when it was my own, I really got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's unlike anything else, especially I'm sure for yourself as the woman giving birth. What a great leap from the pain of to the joy in a split second, right?
Yep.
So, all right, Nancy or Leo, whichever one you want to be.
My recent one was being in Sabino Canyon by myself at 5:30 in the morning. And I was walking in nature and I could look in front and looking back and there was nobody there but me. And it was just beautiful with the cardinals singing, a blue sky, and it was just gorgeous. And it's hard to believe that there's any problems going on in the world when there's so much beauty around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why nature is often a place where we can go back and recover our sense of joy.
Yes.
Good. Jan?
Well, something happened today, and it's a bird thing too. there was a bird. Oh, sorry. Did I go? No, I
No,
didn't.
you're right. You're perfect.
Okay. All right. I've planted some native plantings in my yard, and I've done some butterfly plants and hummingbird plants. And a hummingbird came in today. I've only been here a few months, so that was really joyful because I like birds.
Yeah, nice. You know, the thing of it is sometimes like that can remind us of the joy that we should feel anyway. One day, my truck broke down, right? I called my neighbor who lived down the street and said, you got to come pick me up. And I had to wait for him all the time. And, you know, you get all the blah, 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 you know. And he comes and he picks me up. And as he's putting my truck up on the bed of his truck, there was a hummingbird that basically just flew within inches of me and just stayed right there hovering. And so in the midst of the blah, 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 suddenly I have this moment of joy.
Right.
Right. And I think that sometimes it helps to transform those moments, which is, I think, part of the whole point that this book is going to try to help us to figure out, is how to get to a different perspective as purposely and intentionally as possible. Ron, tell us about a joy. Oops, you're muted.
I miss bicycling on trips, and I'm waiting because of the COVID. But even when you cross the desert or go up the mountains, it's just a joy, and the opportunity that people have opened up their yards or even their houses a time when there's no place to stay. So even in the most difficult times, it's still a joy in doing so.
Yeah, nice. Thank you very much. Garnet?
Well, I was thinking of a couple things that had just popped in my head that 6 years ago, when my younger son got married and I went up to Colorado to celebrate their union, a bunch of us went out to eat afterwards. And that's when my granddaughter, who lives here in Tucson now, told me that she was breaking up with her boyfriend. And I have to say, I was happier about that breakup, joyful to hear that breakup and I was thrilled about my son and his wife getting married. But this gentleman was a control freak, and it was not good for my daughter-in-law. And somebody's typing away, and it's really gets to my ears. And I think Nancy's green light keeps on coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So,
You mute.
So if you know you're making noise, just mute yourself. That's all. Linda, your turn.
So I was going to say nature because so many other people said it brings me tremendous joy, but just on a different topic, and that's music. I find that in church or in other places when I'm there experiencing music, it's an incredible amount of joy I get from that.
Yeah. One of the reasons why, like Ron, when he's biking, I have the same type of feeling when I run, and part of it is because when I run, I also listen to music, and all of that combined to give me a deeper sense of all of that perfection of life that is the foundation of joy. So thank you. Peggy, you're on the top.
Okay, I'm ready. Well, I immediately thought of the day that my daughter gave birth to my first grandchild. And I was in the room when that happened, and it was a completely different experience than when I gave birth to my own children. And I was just overwhelmed, literally speechless with joy when I looked at that little baby and thought about him having his whole life ahead of him.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so very much. Jamie, we're back to you. Did you think of something?
No, I'm just
All right.
enjoying listening to everyone else's.
All right. So I'm going to share one more thing that brought me joy. And Garnett, you made me remember it because it was 6 years ago. And it was one of those where on Facebook today, 6 years ago, this happened,
Yeah.
right? And it was a picture of this little girl using a huge, big squash as a pillow. And it was our goddaughter, Alicia. And she was such a baby at the time. And she was just such a bright light in my life. And when that came back up, I remembered how much she continues to shine that light. Even though it's been 6 years since we moved from Yuma, we continue to get to see her, but she continues to be that source of joy for me, right? And I think a lot of that is what we want to try to figure out, is how to make it so that it's not just because something happened to me today, I'm joyful, but it's that which carries us beyond just the momentary, right? Because every time every time I see Alicia, I feel happy. But there's something that she gives to me that carries beyond just the happiness of her being there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're really searching for. It's that more enduring joy than just the happy of the moment. And not that the happy of the moment is bad. I'm not trying to say any of that. It's that what we're seeking for, though, is deeper and longer lasting. And here's the really tough part about it. Joy is more of a choice than happiness. Where happiness happens because Daddy bought me an ice cream cone, so I'm happy. Joy is I'm going to be happy even though right now there's no ice cream to be bought. I'm going to be joyful somehow. I'm going to find a strength beyond just this moment, a longer vision of everything, right? The hard part is that in life, how many have learned to judge most of the good stuff by some type of goal or achievement or an earning of some sort, and all of that is not wrong, but it says it's a because of then, right? How do we move from a because of to a I have it anyway? That's the instance here. So we have two great spiritual masters to help teach us. We have two people who did not go through the best of times. In fact, went through some of the horrendous parts of our history, of our lifetime history, right? And we look at it and we go, how did they survive that? And not just survive, but how did they become the powerhouse giants of spirituality that they are? And how do we figure out how to do that same thing in the midst of whatever we face, right? Because chances are that some of us will face in the next few years some things that we don't like, some things that aren't perfect for us, some things that will challenge our maybe even our very existence, right? How do we, in the midst of those things, hold on to joy? What allows us to do that? The first thing that they remind us of in the book is that both the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop tell us that joy is our birthright, that it is more inherent in us than all of that negativity that we sometimes feel, that we have a strength within us that is fundamental, and that's where we go to find that joy. Now, why don't we believe that? Because we've also all gone through those other experiences that tell us a different story. All those things that say that life is not perfect. Or maybe I shouldn't ruin the story. Does anybody not know life isn't perfect? All learn that? Okay,
Yeah.
just check.
Right.
All right. So we overlearn those stories sometimes, that life isn't perfect. But it's kind of like the story that 100 people may tell you you're beautiful, but the one person that says you're not is the one that you hear too much, that you play over and over again in your mind. And I think those negative stories, we easily play them over and over and over again. And at least part of what we have to start doing to find joy is to tell the other stories more. The reasons why we are joyful, why joy is our birthright, and the reason why we can carry forward. Right? I love the pictures that they include in the book. And I included some of those in the stuff that I have for you.
Good.
So that you can see the faces of these two men. They call themselves mischievous. And you kind of see that little imp in their eye. And the smile of slightly underhanded, but joyfulness in them. They tease each other a lot. Because they have a lightness that belays some of their experience. Because the other side of their experience is that that's not true. So what has taught you to not take on the negative as the most important thing? Where are some of the times that you've learned differently? Who have been some of your teachers that have helped you?
Well, could I start? Well, I would say friendship, just as they have a friendship. I think our friends bring us joy and remind us about it.
Yeah.
Laughing with friends on the phone. I've had some of the longest conversations with my friends over this virus time. They've been great. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
And I think also, Jim, that you and your preaching remind me daily, either through email or past sermons that you've given, to choose love. It is a choice, and I think it's so ironic that I'm living this wonderful quiet life with my husband and really enjoying it, while so many people are suffering, and it's difficult to have that joy when there's kind of this underlying sadness of what's going on in the world, and a grieving
Right.
for people, but just a grieving for the way we used to live our lives, and the wondering what's next. But in spite of all that, I do go back to different passages in the Bible that give me a lot of hope and trust and faith that things will, like the butterfly being in the cocoon, it's going to hatch, it is going to fly, things are going to return to so many of us.
Right. And that's at least part of what all of this is about believing a story that is bigger than just the moment. It's not that the momentary story is wrong, but it's a smaller story than the real story, the whole story. Does that make sense? And you have to, but you have to keep telling yourself that, because in the moment, whatever's going on right now is real and probably huge enough that you need to deal with it. In one of the later chapters, they talk about going into the doctor, and sometimes when you go into the doctor, and they're talking about it because the Archbishop Desmond Tutu is suffering from cancer as this all unfolds, and so he's having to go through some of those treatments that sometimes are not easy, and sometimes that pain has to be acknowledged and dealt with on the level that it is. Not the only thing that you have to acknowledge, though, is his point. So how many have at least one pain? Maybe the pain in the butt that your husband or wife is. Maybe an ache or pain of a body that's not quite as young as it used to be. Right? All of those things are true, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they're not the whole truth.
Right.
And that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves. How about the rest of you? Where are you discovering how to have joy instead of?
Well, I'll speak. This is kind of a roundabout way, but I grew up in a home that I'll just say did not emphasize the possibility of joy.
Mm.
And I was probably a teenager when I figured that out, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be like this. And so I made a conscious decision to have you could say a more positive attitude about events. And I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is having had some and having read even more about cognitive behavioral therapy, that's kind of along the same lines. You shift your perspective on things consciously. You consciously shift your perspective to something that's a more pleasant way of seeing the same thing.
Good. Yes.
Like the previous speaker was saying, she gets to have quiet time with her husband. That's a pretty positive way of looking at this whole thing. Rather than saying, oh gosh, oh gee, I can't go to the store as easily, I can't gather with people as easily, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And at least part of any moment is the narrative that we give to that moment, and how we speak about it internally as well as out around us defines it even better than what it's doing itself. And you have to decide how you're going to let that moment speak the right message for you. Ed, I know you've gone through nothing that's been difficult in your life. So how have you discovered joy in the midst of it? How are you creating joy in this right now, even though in spite of whatever?
I'd say I'm releasing joy that was natural, but was really pretty well buried.
Yeah.
I got a PhD in victimhood. As I grew up, that was my story, that I was always going to be a victim. The world was against me. And I found out that my poor mother, who was forced to raise her 12 younger brothers and sisters, grandma increasingly worked out in the field. She was apparently so ill prepared to be a mom that she relied totally on the doctor's advice, which the school at that time was, we've been spoiling our kids rotten, feed them on a schedule, diaper them on a schedule, never pick them up, don't give them hugs. And so I felt totally ignored. And I had no idea how that's played out in my life until just recent years, about people, especially in people listening to me. I'm feeling ignored. And so my major breakthroughs, and 2 days ago was one of the huge ones. I've had a real grudge against people that didn't listen to me. I don't want to go into details, but I finally realized yesterday morning, I have not been listening to the Holy Spirit. That's why I'm upset with others. I've been projecting my upset and anger at myself onto all those other people out there that are doing it to me. And I found out that's all projection. You know?
Yeah.
And it completely changes my relationship to the people that I thought were not listening to me.
Let me show you a quote from the book that I really like. It says, sadly, many of the things that undermine our joy and happiness, we create ourselves. So it should be logical that we also have the ability to create more joy. We create much of the sadness, much of the struggle, much of the anger that's there, kind of like Ed just described. So how do we work to create more joy? How do we stop what it is that's undermining our happiness and figure out how to create joy in this moment? Every moment. I have a friend of mine who used to travel most of the way through Phoenix every single morning during commuting hours, right? From like way up in the northwest side down to central Phoenix, which would be my nightmare of a commute, right? She said, I just put on music and I just sang the whole way. So she chooses to be joyful in the midst of what would drive me absolutely up a wall or over a car, right? That's a choice she makes. But I think that you have to make that choice pretty intentionally and pretty consistently, because stuff will continually come back and say, here's something else that could divert your attention away from.
It's what we focus on. Yeah.
It's what we focus on. It's what we choose to see. One of the things that they make very strong about this in this book is that both the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop say that we have to choose to act each day. We have to decide. We have the power to figure out how we're going to view this moment. But we have to make that choice. So is there anything about the moments of your day that make it hard for you to choose the good side of things?
Yeah.
I mean, if you live in a family, they'll for sure give you at least a couple of reasons most days, right?
Yeah.
If you live by yourself, your imagination will build up some fears, some worries, right? And we'll try to tell you all that. So what's one of the demons that you have to fight right now? Who could tell us something that they're struggling with right now? Anybody who's been taking my other classes know that one of my demons is Cousin Bob. He's one of my demons.
Wouldn't you just say the news right now? The news is just awful.
Yeah.
News, the news on a regular basis can beat that demon, right? What else?
Well, I think, okay, for me, it's my health. I sound like a broken record sometimes, but that's my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never really been depressed with it. And I've had my friends tell me, God, you're the eternal optimist. And I'm like, and that's a bad thing?
Yeah.
But
in reality, we need you to help us to understand why it is that you can in the midst of,
I've had this off and on to varying degrees. Right now, I feel extremely blessed because I'm not bedridden.
Yeah.
I'm able to walk my dog. I'm able to have friends. I live in an apartment complex where I have a group of people in here, a little village, and we support each other. And I say hi to people. I say hi to everybody. If they don't want to say hi back, then I respect that. But I'm surprised at how many people respond. I've had one gentleman that said, you're the first person that said hello to me with a smile in months. And we have a huge group of Chinese scholars in here, and a lot of them want to practice their English, and it's just fun to exchange like what life is like for them in China. And I just find so much, there's too much out there that brings me joy. I've discovered a podcast I love with Sam Harris, and I listen to that. I've been listening to that every day, and it just makes my mind grow so much, and I just feel like I'm connecting. And even this, I'm doing Zoom meetings, which I've never done before in my life, and I'm connecting with people more than I have before.
Yeah.
Watching Broadway plays on my computer, I'm just astounded. So I'm extremely joyful.
Sure, but that's because you're choosing to see this moment as a moment where you can become more than, not just for the problems that it is. Because it's not that this time is without problems, right? There's plenty of
I'm in
problems.
pain to some extent every day. Some days it's pain, and it's extremely bad in the mornings.
Yeah.
But the pain, it's just a fact of life. There's no way I can make it worse by concentrating on it, but I choose not to, because it's just there. It's just a part of my life.
Yeah.
It just is. So it's just something I work around.
But what I hear you saying, Judy, is whatever that is a part of your life. This is also part of your life, that now you have this community. And one of the things that they made very clear, as you read through this book, you're going to hear three voices. You're going to hear Desmond Tutu's voice. You're going to hear the Dalai Lama's voice, and you're going to hear those two in conversation. And then you've got a third voice. And that is the man who writes most of this books, the guy who gets the little writing at the bottom. Douglas Adams is his name. And he's the one who kind of brings this whole conversation together. And his voice is sometimes marvelous. What?
Jim, Douglas Abrams. Douglas Adams wrote.
You're right.
Yes.
That's what I saw, the Hitchhiker's Guide. Douglas Abrams, thank you very much. So he's the one who tells us a whole different
You just
story.
brought joy to her.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at one point he looks towards the end of the introduction, and he says this. Let me show it to you. For both of these leaders, it was rare to have a true friend. There are, after all, not many members of the Moral Leaders Club. I was beginning to see how central friendship and relationship more generally was in our experience of joy. And I think that that's a lot of what we're going to be exploring, is how do we make it so that I'm not just trying to make joy happen, but together we are showing joy to each other. That it is in community that we discover the larger definition of life. And whether I sense just the pain or in the joy that can also be there. The difficulty is that community can also be that which causes pain, right? And we have to figure out in every moment how to be the better definition of community in the midst of whatever ways that the poorer definition is being taught out there. What is hindering your journey right now? Who or what is getting in the way of your journey?
Can I be honest here?
Yes.
About 5 hours ago, I started to adopt a sailor's language because I was setting up a new network. So I let the stuff go. And, it just doesn't work out of the box like it says. And, once I got perspective, I just had to walk away. And part of it is just acknowledging, and this is out of my tradition, but acknowledging that suffering is part of the reality, that that joy and sadness, love and fear, those are all polar opposites that are part of life, and to be willing to accept that so that you can face it.
Yeah. At one point in the thing, they said, discovering more joy does not save us from the inevitability of hardship and heartache. And we wish it did, didn't it? But it doesn't. All of that other stuff is part of what we experience in life. Right? How about the rest of you? What's standing in your way right now? What's challenging you? Who is challenging you? Could be a question. Go ahead, Azizi.
Me.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's what stories I'm telling about myself, right? And if you're honest with yourself, many of those stories that you tell yourself go back a long way.
Oh yeah.
Somebody earlier mentioned my family didn't have joy because that was the narrative they were telling themselves. That's not the whole story, is it? Whatever they were saying about joy isn't the only perspective, and that's part of what we have to learn. What are the other narratives you've taught yourself, or others have taught you?
Well, I'll speak up. This COVID thing has really got me, fearful. I have to say that. So I'm looking forward to going back into the archive and hearing what Thich Nhat Hanh has to say about that. But talk about something over which one has, I feel like, limited control. I can do everything, but still it feels like I've got a target on my back. And I think that's it's a rational way of believing for me at this point. So that's a bit of a concern now.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this as a spiritual exercise.
Good.
I really am.
Good.
So I've taken steps to do what I can to actually create more joy in my life.
Good.
So that's how I'm seeing it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to just say, oftentimes you say, and here's the good news. So I think that phrase is sort of a hinge to looking at things, like the COVID pandemic that we're all living through. Here's the good news. We're all doing it together.
Right.
And there's something about I was at Costco yesterday and I overheard a man saying, this is the new normal, referring to everybody in masks. And I had this like rush of love for these total strangers because I could see all of our mortality, that we're all mortal, whether we die of the virus or whatever, we're only here for a short amount of time. And I just felt this connection with these total strangers in Costco. And that was the good news in a way, even in a difficult time.
Part of what I know is that even though there may be all kinds of bad news, there's things that are not the bad news. And for me, that's why there's always a presence of good news, right? Joni going through all her chemo treatments was not good news. But what she didn't have to face, what some of the other things could have been, that's good news, right? What she didn't have in the face of it. If just the timeline, Jan and I were talking, if she'd have gone through her chemo treatments just a few months later, right in the middle of this, instead of where she'd gotten most of her immunity back before this,
Yeah.
how much worse would that have been?
Yes.
And so it's good news even in the midst of the difficult news, right? And that's at least part of where we find joy, is to try to figure out that bigger picture that tells us not just the pain of the moment, the suffering of the moment, but that which allows us to redefine the moment differently. In the chapters coming up, Desmond Tutu is going to talk about apartheid and the horrendous stuff that it puts into his life. But he's also going to talk about how that helped him and folks like Nelson Mandela to find strength and power and purpose and meaning and definition of self differently than what they would have had without that. The Dalai Lama is going to do the same thing as he talks about China and having to go into exile and be far from his homeland for the majority of his life. And how does he, in the midst of that which is not his first choice, and he's going to talk about how in the midst of that, that's what helped him to find better. And that's our job as well. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to send a bunch of stuff out to you as soon as this class is over. If you haven't yet, please go to the chat and put in your email address so that I can send you all of the handouts that I have. Included in those handouts, if you do not have the book, are all the first chapters. And I'll do about 7 different chapters for you to do. If you have the book, you don't have to even open them up. But if you don't have the book, then you'll need to open them up.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Because I wasn't sure if everyone would be able to buy the book. Right now, you know, with deliveries and things, we don't know that. But one of the things I want to share with you, well, let me show you, first of all, what's going to happen through the whole of all of this. Oops, that's not what I want to do. This is going to be our itinerary. So here we are in the introduction, and this might be a little bit ambitious, but I'm going to do about 3 chapters. They're not really long chapters, but they're pretty packed chapters. I'm going to do about 3 chapters a week. So you'll get this sheet of paper so you can see what chapters to be able to read.
Okay, good.
If it feels to us that that's too much, then we'll cut it back and we'll go a little bit longer and do just a couple chapters a week. But as of now, that's kind of what I'm going to do. At the back, down on the bottom of this page, you'll see that I put a thing that talks about what's at the end of the whole book. And it's a bunch of practices. So I'm going to show you one right now if I can. And it's the very first one that they give out there. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to maybe do this very purposely throughout our time together. Okay? And so what this is a morning intention setting. And what you do is basically you sit in a comfortable space, very purposeful space, and ask these questions like this. What is my heart's desire? What do I wish for myself, for my loved ones, and for the world? And discover your intention. And work purposely as we go through this to discover what is our intention in all of this that we're going to do. Okay? So that will be one of the things I'm going to send to you. Now, here's the thing. This is what it's going to look like when you open it up. it's going to be sideways. If you read sideways, then go ahead and don't do a thing. But if you need it to, see this little thing right here that's kind of a circular thing?
Rotation.
You click on that and it'll come up to be the right side, the right way. All right?
Yep.
So you do whichever way works best for you, sideways or right side up.
Or upside down.
But just take that and just every morning just look through that and just let that help you to begin the internal conversation about how we let joy grow around us and speak louder to us, because all of us have joy, don't we?
Yeah.
And it's not scary. Douglas Abrams, I got it right this time, you know. Douglas Abrams ends the chapter by saying this: I guess even great spiritual leaders get nervous when they are journeying into the unknown. And all of us have reasons to be nervous, scared, unwilling to journey. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't. It means that we have to figure out how to do it in the midst of all that. Okay? So I'll send all that out to you as soon as you leave. If you haven't given me your email address, go ahead and send it to me now.
Jim, I'm going to say something tongue-in-cheek right now.
Yes.
I got one leg up on all y'all.
Okay.
Because do y'all know what my name means, Leticia?
Pain in the...
No, it means joy.
Oh.
All right, any last questions before we go?
Just good to see all of you.
It is good to have all of you here. I look forward to the journey ahead. Discovering joy is always a good journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
All
So
right.
again, good journey to you and Joni and your mother-in-law.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, drive carefully.
Safe travel. We'll try the best we can. Thank you.
Okay, well, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Jim, pay back so you know what.
All right.
Is it already in? No. Okay, where do I put it in?
And all you have to do is down on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a red button there. And
Yep.
You just click on that is what you want to do.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Where it says leave meeting.
Okay.
You see that?
Where do I enter the email address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Down on the bottom row, there's a button that looks like a cartoon balloon, and it says chat. If you click on that, a thing will pop up, and it says type message here. Do you see that?
I need to get back up somehow. Let's see if I don't see a place to back this up.
Okay. Do you see the
I'm going for the Bigfoot look, right?
Okay. But you see the you see the Zoom box in front of you, right?
All I have is leave meeting and cancel.
Oh, cancel that right now for a second.
Okay, now I'm back in.
Okay. So now go down to the bottom and find chat.
Got it.
You got it? Just click on that and a box should pop up. Maybe in front of you, maybe to one side. Do you see it?
I think it's, yeah.
And on the bottom of that box, it should say type message here.
Okay, got it.
And just type your email into that.
Thanks. I need all the help I can get in navigating a screen.
It's always fun trying to figure out all the different things here.
I truly am a dinosaur in the digital age.
But the good news is all of this is dragging you into what you never thought you needed to go to.
Yeah. It's like learning a new language. see. Email is Vicki. Is it my email or what?
Wherever you would like to get.
Vicki,
Um,
tell me. My email. Yeah. My email 41 at yahoo.com. Becky. Is it my email and 41?
No. It's just Rebecca Wills.
Okay.
There you go. Yep, you got it.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Got
I got it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Vaya con Dios.
All right. You too.